Kenyon, today we want to talk about gaslighting.
Yes.
Another widely overused psychological term.
And misunderstood term.
And misunderstood.
So let's set the scene.
Mm-hmm.
Gaslighting is usually applied to like a slow burn dynamic. So we're talking about a situation with, usually it's like a long-term relationship. It can be with a partner. It can be with a boss or a supervisor. It can be with a parent.
Mm-hmm.
It can even be with a friend or sort of a frenemy. You start hearing a lot of lines that challenge your experience, your reality of something that happened. Lines like, oh, that never happened.
Okay.
Or you're too sensitive.
Mm.
Nobody else would take it that way. What's your problem?
Yeah.
You're just remembering it wrong. And so over time, if we're the person who's being targeted with those kinds of comments, we move from like, oh wait, that wasn't okay, and saying something and speaking up and defending ourselves to the person. We move from that place to a place of maybe I am crazy.
Oh. Like really questioning our own reality.
Yeah. Maybe my memory really is the problem. Maybe I shouldn't trust myself or my reactions. That's the red flag of gaslighting that we're talking about today. It's not a simple argument. It's not a little difference in memory. It's really a slow, very deliberate, very malicious bending of someone's sense of reality and trust in themselves.
Yeah. This kind of, it sounds like a real dark manipulation.
Yeah.
So
it's, I hesitate to use the word evil when we're talking about human behavior.
Sure.
But I mean, this is up there.
This is up there with evil behavior, right?
Yeah. This is rough. Like molesting kids. It's bad. It's a bad one.
So I want to talk a little bit about maybe where the term gaslighting came from, because it kind of explains that. I think the true kind of like
a lot of people don't know the origin of the word. Yeah.
So it was actually from a 1938 British play called Gaslight.
Right.
And then more famously, that play was made into a movie.
From the 40s.
In the 40s, 1944. It was a movie starring Ingrid Bergman.
Nice.
And in this movie, in the story, this husband manipulates his wife into doubting her sanity. Right. So that he can cover up all his crimes. So like that kind of evil behavior we were talking about. This included literally dimming the gas-powered lights in their home, and then denying that the lights had ever changed when she noticed it. And over time, she really started to believe that there was something wrong with her. And psychologists and public adopted that term then, gaslighting, as a term for the specific pattern of manipulation, of psychological manipulation, where you make someone question their perceptions, memory or reality.
Right.
And then it first kind of appeared in print in the 60s. And since then, and really where it became widely used, was in the 2010s.
Last couple of years, not too long ago.
Yeah, and I think we started to hear it a lot during like the teens, and then I think it's just continued. And I think you and I probably hear this all the time in sessions and outside of sessions even.
Definitely. Definitely hear it on the TikTok.
Yeah. But
I mean, there's an upside to it that it was, I mean, like when these terms are out there in the public consciousness, the upside is that survivors of actual gaslighting finally have a language for, they have a term for this very, very, very confusing, type of psychological abuse.
Yeah. Which we had talked about before, right? When we talked last time about trauma, and we've talked about boundaries before, but when we talk about trauma, I think that was like the word trauma or post-traumatic stress disorder, when we start looking at the diagnoses that go along with it, that gives people who have truly experienced
overwhelm, like trauma as like where your nervous system can't process what's happening to you.
Right. That gives them a word, a definition, something to identify and say, this is the thing that's happened. When it's overused, much like the term gaslighting, because this is a real phenomenon. This is something
people do this.
That's right. This is something that happens. This is something that happens in a lot of relationships, and a lot of, especially we see in a lot of domestic abuse relationships, and where things are happening. But when it becomes overused, the word loses its value, and the people that are truly experiencing it, it almost contributes even more to them questioning themselves, like, oh, is this really bad? Is this thing that I'm kind of experiencing in my relationship actually that toxic?
Right. It can prompt people to sort of dismiss whatever the issue is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it also, like, for us to just sort of blanket any form of denial, defensiveness, or memory difference, or lying as gaslighting is severely problematic.
Yeah. I think, and as you were saying, the reason gaslighting, that term stuck, I think it was a very simple kind of word for a very confusing experience. That because when we think about psychological abuse and creating that self-doubt for something, that is a more complex version of abuse.
Right.
And I think it finally gave somebody a word they could hang on to.
Right.
Which is great. People felt overall less alone, and they could name what was happening. But the problem is, it kind of created defensiveness, and I think could kind of create this dynamic with the other person of you don't admit you're wrong, you're gaslighting me, instead of saying you're wrong.
Right.
It's like, well, you're gaslighting me. You're doing this thing, instead of just accepting accountability.
Right.
Yeah.
And just to call somebody out on lying, I feel like, people don't do that as much ever since the, gaslighting became such a popular term. Mm-hmm. And there's a danger in that too, because it's not clear.
Right.
It's not. What does the term actually mean?
So the term gaslighting, it's a sustained pattern of behavior that's meant to erode, like psychologically, it's a sustained pattern of behavior meant to erode your trust in your own perception.
Right.
And so that you start relying on the other person to tell you what's real.
Exactly.
So I just want to say that again. Gaslighting is a sustained pattern of behavior meant to erode your trust in your own perception, memory, and judgment, so that you start relying on the other person to tell you what's real.
Exactly.
And that is such a deep manipulation of trying to create a sense of dependence.
Well, it's a little like codependency, right? Where
it is, yeah.
Codependency in the sense of, whatever kind of a day you're having, that's the kind of day I'm going to have. Right. I'm going to allow my reality and my experience to be manipulated and dictated, really, by whatever your reality and experience are.
Yeah. The difference is if I exploit that, that's gaslighting.
Right.
So if I know, if I've created that dynamic and I'm aware of it,
right,
that is the difference between just like when we talk about codependency, and that's another good term to bring up, and in the way it's used and applied in treatment world. But if has a more malicious and conscious kind of behavior to it.
Right. No, for sure.
And
so it's a pattern.
Mm-hmm. It's not an incident.
It doesn't happen once. It has to happen over time, again and again.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's a pattern, that's how we move from, like, we start doubting ourselves more, looking to the other person more, the person who's gaslighting us more, to dictate our reality.
Right.
Okay.
Well, because we have that doubt. So the more we doubt ourselves, then we're going to sit there kind of almost frozen, right? Like, what do I do? What do I do? And so we
rely on the other person.
Absolutely.
Who's doing the gaslighting.
Which leads to power and control. I mean, that is what gaslighting is. One person seeking power and control over a relationship or a system. Right. And we can see it politically, we see this every day. We have the president who goes out there and says, I didn't say that.
Right.
No, that's being manipulated. That's fake news. That is gaslighting. That is manipulation with the intent to mislead.
Got it.
Other people.
And make you doubt yourself.
Yeah. Make you doubt the system.
And then you rely on
Right.
In that case, the president more.
The truth, right? Or the version of the truth.
Right.
So that's how it works. Like, as for an example, as a system, right? It creates doubt where we have to where we doubt the system. We don't believe what the system's doing.
Right.
And then we have to rely on this person who has malicious intent, very malicious intent. The way it works in a relationship is like we were saying, like, I'm going to, if I know that if I can create doubt for you in anything that we're talking about in our relationship, or if there's just a disagreement in the home, then it makes you more reliant on me. I never told you about that. Yeah. I didn't say that about like you, or I told you, I did tell you to do this. I told you were supposed to pay that bill. Why didn't you pay the electric bill? It could be as simple as that. And that's the really toxic part of that, right? Is gaslighting can be used at such a low, like kind of like covert level that people don't even realize it's happening. It's not just about disagreements though.
No.
Right.
Well, it's like you can expand it to all lying with the goal of making you stop trusting yourself.
Right.
So anything under that sort of umbrella, which can be pretty broad.
Yeah.
I keep thinking about, I was a huge Roald Dahl fan as a kid. And there's this book, lesser known book, The Twits.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Love that book.
I loved it too, because it mirrored my parents' marriage. These people who are married to each other and hate each other and torment each other. And there's one scene in the book where the wife starts chopping off a little bit of the husband's. No, she starts adding a little bit of length to the husband's walking stick.
That's right.
And tells him he has the shrinks.
He's getting shorter.
Right. You have the shrinks. And meanwhile, he's like, what? And he's looking to her. He has to look to her to confirm that.
Right.
And she's just really,
just abusive. It's just torment, right?
But it always made me laugh.
Yeah.
Gaslighting isn't funny.
No.
But
Roald Dahl made it funny.
Roald Dahl, yeah. He was very dark.
Extremely dark, yeah. We should do an episode on just the writings of Roald Dahl.
Yes.
And the psychological understanding of that. Let's talk a little bit about what gaslighting is not, because I think that's really what we have to look at, because we hear it on social media, we hear it in the public. Everybody just says, "Oh, that person was gaslighting me. They're gaslighting me." So let's talk about what it's not. And and this kind of like mirrors a lot of what we talked about with trauma. There are hard relationships in life. There are painful relationships. There are experiences that we have that we just don't like. Mm-hmm. When we have an exchange that we don't like, just because there's a disagreement, that does not mean that we are being gaslit.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So just because somebody is being defensive so say you call somebody out, just because they're being defensive and refusing to apologize and accept accountability or responsibility for what they said or their actions, that doesn't mean we're being gaslit.
Interesting.
Right. Yeah. So if you do something and I don't like it, and I say, Kenyon, that was really offensive. I would like you to apologize to me for that. And you're like, yeah, I'm not apologizing for that. Like, that's how I felt. That's what I wanted to do. You're not gaslighting me.
Got it.
Just because you're refusing to apologize.
Because I'm not manipulating you into doubting yourself.
No, you're just not apologizing. You just don't want to accept responsibility.
Yeah, I'm being defensive.
Sure, yeah,
right.
Which is fine. If that's your MO, you can be defensive.
Right.
But right.
Another one is like when that's not gaslighting is I just remember that event differently than you do.
Yes.
And I'm actually being honest. Like, no, I didn't. I really don't remember saying that.
Yeah.
That happens a lot with in my marriage, where my wife will say, you were yelling and I'll be like, I really don't have that memory. That's not my memory.
Yeah.
And she'll be like, well, that's my memory. Mm-hmm. And
which isn't wrong.
No.
Neither of you are wrong there. So here's the issue: is that human recall and memory is actually really not accurate.
Right.
That's why, like, when we look at like eyewitness testimony in courts, and memory recall of events and like big events, it immediately becomes distorted.
Right.
And it becomes distorted because the way that we remember things is by recreating the event in our mind. We don't actually pull the image off the shelf and
the memory. It's not just baked already.
No, it's not a photo book where you like open it and go, oh, here it is with all the senses.
Right.
It's you're leafing through and saying, well, actually, on April 4th, I did not raise my voice here. There was no picture of me yelling.
Right.
You recreate the memory of that time. You recreate it in your brain every time you work on recall. This is why trauma continues for people. When they remember a traumatic event, they're recreating the scenario and they're being re-traumatized each time. That's why it's an important distinction.
Yeah, you're making everything. Your brain is making everything to order, almost like a cook.
It is, yes. You're pulling more senses in, smells, sights, sounds, what your body felt at the time. So each person has a different experience. And then what happens, because we're all different that way, you are going to recall a similar event differently than I'm going to recall it.
Right.
And that's what happens. And then 3 weeks from now, if we both have to go recall that same event, I mean, like, yeah, Kenyon, you were yelling and you were like super intense and like all amped up. And that might not have been the case.
Right. It
was probably somewhere in between both of our experiences.
Exactly. And that's an important point to make.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of situations, I think, conflicts where both parties feel misunderstood.
Absolutely.
But that doesn't necessarily mean it's gaslighting. Because I'm not trying to manipulate you. You're not trying to manipulate me. You're just saying, hey, this is how I remember it. You're not hearing me. You're not understanding me.
Yeah. So there's ways to reference that. Mm-hmm. So when we think gaslighting's happening, it's important to actually relabel the thing so we can the experience. So we look at it. You're being defensive, right?
Stop lying to me.
Yeah. We remember this differently. Mm-hmm. I feel dismissed or not believed.
Right.
So we can talk more about what the feeling is and what the exchange is going on in the relationship, rather than just saying you're gaslighting me.
Right.
Right. We can't just dismiss it with this label that isn't even appropriate to the experience.
Exactly. Different problems, different conflicts, issues between people that are going to arise in these long-term relationships especially need precise language and names.
Yeah.
And I think that's our point. It's like we're not trying to be pedantic. We're not trying to put too much of an emphasis on word choice, but people dismiss semantics. But if we call everything gaslighting, it's harder to know not only what it actually is, but like how to handle it.
Yeah.
What to do. What am I going to do next?
That's right. It really clouds any direction or any ability to move forward.
Right.
Or as we talked, to have that relationship, right? When we talked about boundaries, let's think of it this way. Gaslighting is kind of that, it's closing the window.
Yeah.
When I talked about having the screen. The screen to kind of let that fresh air in, wave to your neighbor and say, hey, what's going on? But they can't put their hand through your window.
Right.
Because the screen's there.
And we don't have to give them cookies.
Right. Gaslighting is closing the window. If I say you're gaslighting me, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
We're shutting down any ability to kind of like, we're shutting down any ability for any corrective action to take place. Mm-hmm. It would be much better if I said, Kenyon, I'm actually feeling a little disrespected by you right now. And maybe we could talk about that.
Yeah. But
that takes a lot of work too.
It does. But it's amazing how disarming that language is.
Yeah.
Like to say, hey, Kenyon, I'm feeling I'm feeling disrespected right now, as opposed to stop disrespecting me. Why are you disrespecting me?
Right. I think part of the reason we reach for this word too, and it shuts down that conversation, because it's generally people don't like conflict, and that it's conflict, right? I think conflict kind of gets blown up into this idea that it has to be like some big fight. Mm-hmm. It's not. Conflict is just some disagreement, some kind of something where we just don't align on our view. And that happens in any relationship. That is a natural human condition, to have conflict of like how we see things. Mm-hmm. What happens then is that we get defensive, right? We start to get that kind of like fight or flight kind of like
Right.
a discomfort,
Tense
a little anxiety.
Yeah.
And when we're being gaslit, when this thing is actually happening to us, we start to have these feelings of like the self-doubt, the sensitivity, maybe I'm crazy. There's like this fog after conversations. Like
We stop trusting ourselves.
we do.
What did we talk about? Mm-hmm. What,
Now that when you say that, the thing I'm hearing is fear.
Absolutely.
If I stop trusting myself, I can't walk outside and navigate the world. Yeah. I can't even navigate the inside world or my own world without having a little bit of anxiety.
Totally.
And we know what happens when we have anxiety. We start kind of like shutting down. We start reacting to things.
Yeah.
We close off relationship. That becomes very maladaptive, very unhelpful.
You effectively become helpless because we become so reliant upon the person who's gaslighting us.
That's right.
Over apologizing. That's another way, that sort of symptom of being gaslit.
Yeah. Here's your Roald Dahl term, the shrinking. You've got case of the shrinks, right?
Yeah.
Shrinking is when we talk about it in like a clinical sense, it's that idea like retreating.
Yeah. Becoming small.
So not
second guessing yourself.
That's right.
Not speaking up.
Mm-hmm. Maybe he was onto something there. I think he was definitely onto something.
He was onto a lot. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then what happens is we start to just trade our reality for the other person's.
Right.
And we don't get to live our own authentic life.
Right.
Which we've talked a lot about. And when we think about, and I would ask people just to reflect on this, if your insides don't match your outsides, if you're not living authentically, if you can't live your own life, what does that feel like? Mm-hmm. What feelings does that elicit? What sensations happen? And how do you like go through your day then?
I think you go through your day in a fog.
Sure.
It's like there's a serious disorientation where, nothing when you don't trust yourself. I had an experience with an abusive partner many years ago where she over time eroded my trust in myself by telling me I was stupid and I couldn't handle anything. And I did believe it after a while. Yeah. I got to a point where I was like, oh my God, I can't even book a plane ticket.
Yeah.
Without this person doing it for me or telling me how to do it. And so, it is, I remember just kind of feeling like everything is too overwhelming. I'm going to dissociate. I'm going to be in a fog all the time.
That fog, and that also leads to some confusion too, right? Yeah. If you routinely like leave a conversation, you're like, what just happened here? And I don't even know like where I am in this whole thing. That anytime we leave a conversation, we're genuinely confused like that. I remember there were two physical kind of scenarios that I was always taught were like really good red flags for when you're dealing with somebody who's really toxic or manipulative. One is that if you leave the conversation or any conversation with them, and you're always like, wait, what just happened? Where am I? Like, you feel like you kind of got like run around.
Right.
And the other one is, and if people think about this, if you've run across people like this in your life, you get that chill, like the hair on the back of your neck kind of stands up, or you're just like that. Trust that we still have really good sensory kind of like warning signs.
Yeah, instincts we sometimes call it.
I was looking for that word. I was like, what? Oh, yeah, it's instincts.
Just think of the Cuba Gooding Jr. film.
But we trust that.
Yeah.
Those and that's what happens if we leave a conversation with either of those feelings, like huge red flag. Gaslighting will do that until you start to doubt it, right? So if we're having that constant thing, you're like, wait, what's going on? Why? This isn't right. I know this wasn't the reality.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about how these psychological experiences actually affect us physically. Gaslighting does that too. We experience knots in our stomach. That stomach drops, right? You feel that really kind of like pit. Maybe tight chest. It just nothing matches that spoken kind of like content. It doesn't match what's being said.
I've even seen cases where people are, they talk about having panic attacks. And it's actually the result of somebody having gaslit them to the extent that they don't trust themselves at all, and they feel utterly inept in the face of any sort of situation.
That's right. Including, I'm going to be painted this way.
Yeah.
I'm going to, after this conversation, I'm going to still be sitting here holding the bag, basically.
Yeah, and you're going to think of me negatively.
And then everybody else is going to think of me that way. Look, this is how I look now. This is how I have to walk through the world.
Right.
This is how I appear to your family.
Right.
This is how I appear to my colleagues at work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's really it's really malicious.
The more we talk about it, it's like this toxic, just really, like you said before, evil.
It does. Yeah. It does feel a lot like evil. And the context in which this takes place, we talked about them a little bit before, but I mean, again, relationships is you mentioned domestic abuse.
Right.
Families where you'll see this with like a family, the parents who've abused the child, and then the child actually confronts them, and the parents saying, "What are you talking about? You had the most amazing childhood. Right. We gave you everything. You're just really ungrateful.
Yeah.
You're just really, really, really selfish."
By the way, it can be even more kind of like toned down from that.
Yeah.
I don't think those in relationships and in family, it might not even be at an abusive level. It might just be a little, maybe there's some neglect.
Right.
In relationships, maybe it's just somebody who just does not ever want to take accountability.
Yes.
And so they're just going to constantly put it on the other person.
Right.
Which is abusive on a spectrum of like things that we should be doing to other human beings.
Right.
But and so we could see it like that. There's that when we talked about trauma, we had single event kind of like markers, and then we had that
complex trauma,
the complex, which is that low level consistent stuff.
Consistent, low level. It doesn't look on the outside. It may not look that bad.
Right.
It's not as obvious as like single incident trauma, but it's really taking its toll on our psyche. Yeah. But you're absolutely right. Anytime somebody is not taking accountability. Mm-hmm. So that can, in an office setting, in a work setting, can be,
Oh yeah, what do we always? Oh, like these, like that doesn't happen here. We don't do those things here. That's not part of our work culture.
Right.
Which means you end up kind of like feeling like you're not part of the.
You're othered.
You're not part of the work culture.
That doesn't happen here. That sort of denial.
Yeah.
You see it with. All the time when I'm working with SUD, with substance use disorders, and people who are in what we used to term active addiction, there's a lot of gaslighting, not only on the part of the person who's struggling with the disorder,
right?
Not only for them to gaslight others, but for them to gaslight themselves.
It was like a self-gaslighting process.
It's really to protect whatever the maladaptive behavior is. In that case, probably like a substance use disorder. So, we do this all the time when I was in a rehab, in IOPs. Like, let's take an inventory, we would call it, of how you used to act when you were addicted to this substance, when you were on it, and how would you rationalize it and justify it to yourself, saying things like, "Oh, it wasn't that bad. I never got in trouble. I never got arrested.
Right. I wasn't stealing.
I wasn't stealing. I wasn't abusing anybody physically."
So it sounds like it minimizes the impact that it might have on themselves and on other people, right?
It does. And, you're exaggerating. I'm exaggerating. Meanwhile, your body has had this experience of, that's at least with substance use disorder, often traumatic.
Of course.
So your body's going to disagree with that.
Yeah.
So you're saying one thing to yourself, and your body's feeling a different sensation altogether.
Right. And that misalignment, it creates that discrepancy, doesn't allow someone to move forward, really. No. And it's funny because when we, I've worked in a lot of like substance use programs and rehabs and detoxes and everything, and it's everybody always looks like, oh, you're rationalizing, and it becomes like this kind of like fight back and forth.
Right.
When you think about really what's happening there, it is a
Can you explain what rationalization is, though?
So rationalizing is kind of what we're talking about. Like it's like self gaslighting, I think, is kind of like
not admitting.
Yeah, we're not admitting that what's going on, or we're minimizing the damage that something, or the negativity that something had, right? Like, I did this because,
right?
Or, hey, I was using because, I had really, work was so hard. I had to do this. It kind of uses
it deflects accountability.
It deflects accountability, or gives you an excuse as to why you were doing the thing.
Right.
Right. So
we can let ourselves off the hook.
Yeah. So it's deflecting accountability by minimizing the problem,
right?
And giving you, like, I guess, like, what you would think would be a good reason to use.
Right.
Or a good reason to behave that way. Well, of course I did that. Look at what I was dealing with.
Yes.
That's rationalizing.
And you'll hear that in all kinds of contexts.
Sure. That's not just substance use.
No, just to rationalize any or justify any type of, maladaptive behavior or harmful behavior.
Right. It wasn't that bad. I don't do that all the time.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. That's how
I don't yell every day.
Right.
I only yell when the kids disrespect me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like,
no, it's true. Well, it's like the fake apology, the non-apology.
Yeah. Exactly.
I'm sorry that you think I was unreasonable, but the reality is I was dealing with so much stuff, and you were being really unreasonable. And what else was I supposed to do?
Yeah. Yeah. You created this. Then the gaslighting starts.
Yeah.
Look, you kind of created this environment.
Yeah.
That's not how things happened.
Yeah.
You actually did this.
I don't behave this way in a vacuum.
No.
You must have been. Yeah. Ooh, there you go.
It gets deep. One of the things I want people to know too, and I think we've talked about this, is how do people deal with gaslighting if we think that that's what's going on? If we've made the determination that it's not just something we disagree with, it's not just somebody not accepting accountability,
right?
But if you're truly being gaslit, how do we deal with that?
I think a lot of it is about defining your reality outside the dynamic. So the dynamic, if you're in the context of whatever that long-term relationship is, where you're being gaslit or where you suspect that you're being gaslit, if you're within that context, you can't really trust anything.
No.
So here's an idea. Write down what happened. If there was a conflict, if there was something, like, write down the events as you remember them right away.
Yeah.
And then share the specifics of what happened with somebody you do trust, someone who's not within the bounds of that gaslighting long-term relationship. Hey Chris, here's what this person said, and here's what I said, and here's how I felt about it.
Yeah. And read it from your notes.
That's what I mean. Like, sharing it with you.
Right.
Because you're trusted.
I tell people to do this in couples therapy all the time. And they're like, oh yeah, great. I'm going to get the score keep and I'm going to get to show you. Like, no. Let's be clear. We're not doing this to score keep. We're not doing this to prove the other person wrong. We're actually doing this to highlight the difference in experience.
Right. And validate each
other. Which is a really important distinction. Again, we're not doing it to score keep. We're not doing it to prove the other wrong, but we're doing it to test reality. And I think when we're looking at couples work and relationship work, a lot of that is, hey, listen, you experience it this way. I experience it this way. How are we going to come together in the middle somewhere to make the relationship continue to work?
Absolutely.
And so, but your suggestion on writing things down, journaling about it right away, before our brain starts clouding it, before all the other stuff starts spinning it into something else.
Yeah. Grab your phone and just do a voice memo.
Absolutely.
Easy.
Absolutely.
And it records and it's there. And then look for patterns over time.
Yeah.
Like, okay, is this a one-off? If it's a one-off, doesn't mean it's right, doesn't mean it's okay, but that's different. Gaslighting is a pattern.
Yes.
So
does something happening like 2 or 3 times make it a pattern, or is that still? Because I think I wonder if people are like, oh, it's a one-off one time, but then they did it like, months later or whatever it might be.
If you're seeing something happen, say 3 times, and it's within a set period of time that's not too, spaced out, meaning it's happening, hey, within a month, this happens 3 times
Yeah.
or more, then yeah, you're looking at a pattern.
Okay. That's important. I think it's also I think we should also look at whether this is something that we have consistently seen since the beginning of the interaction with this person, or if it's just maybe something happened and it's a new pattern. So if it's a new pattern, we want to be really curious about it and say, hey, what's going on? Why is this thing suddenly happening?
Good point.
Why is this person acting this way? Why are they gaslighting me now when for 10 years that didn't happen?
Yeah. No, for sure.
Because I think there's some events that can maybe contribute to this too.
Yeah. The other thing I think too is, watch how you're talking to yourself.
Oh, I love that. I'm so big on
internal language.
On the way we talk to ourselves. I'm always going on about our narrative, right? Our story. We think about unhelpful thinking styles, right? So,
but watch out if you find yourself saying, "Oh, I must be crazy," or "I'm just too sensitive," or "I'm making a mountain out of a molehill."
Yeah. Any language that's putting yourself down, right, or sounds like that kind of self-doubt or that judgment. You want to shift to something that's more about the pattern, right? Oh, something about this interaction is making me doubt myself, and that matters.
You said it earlier with the I statement.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe you're disrespecting me. You gave me an example, but use those I statements as a sort of anchor for how you talk to yourself and how you experience your reality.
That's right, because it's allowing you to connect. We always want to be aligned, right? That internal, external kind of like thing. We want it to be as aligned as possible. So I statements do that.
Right.
This is why in clinical interactions in therapy, and I remember even when I was first starting off, I was always like, hey, use I statements. Use I statements. Don't say you. Don't say you. Don't say you. Use I statements for a reason.
Absolutely.
Because it's keeping it on what your experience is. Yeah. And I love that way that you said it before, like anchoring yourself in what your experience is. Yeah. Right. And that's what we have to, that's when we talk about grounding ourselves, being aware of what we're kind of experiencing. We want to be anchored or kind of like really kind of aware of where our feet are.
Absolutely. And validated too. It acknowledges what, again, reality is subjective. Yeah. I have my reality that I'm experiencing right now. You have yours in a squeaky couch.
Oh my God.
And, and also the way you experience that squeaky couch is valid. Yes. And the way I'm experiencing this room and this reality is valid.
Absolutely. The other thing we do, and this goes back to boundaries, and this is how we deal with gaslighting, is that we test the relationship. Right. And what I mean by that is that we can do this gently. We don't want to be like, you know what you do, like kind of like blow it all up. But we talk about it, and this is a communication thing. So a healthy boundary would be like, when you say this, like when you say X, I end up doubting my own memory. Right. And that doesn't work for me. Yeah. So you're drawing a clear line in the sand to say, the thing you're doing that makes me feel this way, or I end up having this feeling because you're doing that thing. You can't make me feel a way, but you say something, I end up feeling this way, right? And that doesn't work. So we need to figure out a different exchange.
Exactly.
And I want to go back because I made that correction there. When you do this, I end up doing this. Not when you do this, it makes me feel this way. Because I think all too often we blame other people.
That's assigning blame.
Yeah, we blame people for our own feelings, and your actions or the way somebody talks about something or behaves it certainly has an impact on how I feel. Right. But we have to be responsible for our own feelings and our own reactions to things. So that's another place where words matter. So when you do X, I end up doubting my own memory about that, and that doesn't work for me. And then we watch what happens over time. Does the other person end up showing some curiosity about it or a willingness to understand, or do they continue to do the same thing?
Right.
Or do they double down and flip it back? Do they gaslight us about that too, which I think could happen.
That could definitely happen. Yeah. It also takes the charge out of the exchange in a great way. So like, it reminds me of your definition of boundaries from last week. Like a boundary can be like, hey, the goal here is communication. Yes. The goal is for us to keep talking and to remain in relationship. And if you do this, I do this. Or so let's, figure out the solution. But again, that's taking it out of the context of shame and blame.
Right.
And that's not the goal here.
No, the goal is to really address the phenomenon.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that
shift it.
Yeah. And it's to look at what the exchange is. When I say phenomenon, I mean the experience, the exchange. So then that's what the goal is, and to shift that. You're right. The other thing we have to do to deal with gaslighting or address gaslighting, if it is truly happening under the definition, is assess safety and what the options are.
For sure.
Because as we said, this is a real phenomenon. This is something that really happens, and it
constitutes emotional abuse.
It's manipulative. It is with malice, often. And so we need to name that, as you said, as emotional abuse and as real harm, and address that. Like, how are we going to address this emotional abuse that's happening?
Yeah. And that's where, as therapists, we can come in with, options. Hey, maybe if it's, if the gaslighting's happening in a couple, and say, hey, you know what, I think maybe it's time for couples counseling, where a third party can help, assess, like, oh, hey, you're not crazy. And yes, you are being manipulative.
Yeah.
Or say, actually, no, that's not a manipulative. This isn't gaslighting. What's going on? You're just arguing.
Sure. Or so-and-so just doesn't want to apologize.
Right.
Or you, like you said, you're arguing. You just disagree about this thing. The thing that we really need to look at here is that we don't need a perfect label in order to get help. So if we're experiencing that, if we're experiencing gaslighting, we don't need to wait until we can kind of define it as that. If anybody is feeling those things, if they're doubting the reality in the relationship, if things are coming up like that, where you're like, wait, am I crazy? Am I questioning my own experience here? Get help.
Yeah.
Reach out, ask for help. You don't need to wait until you can clearly define that term to actually ask for help.
Absolutely. And that's where having a trusted friend can also just be a huge boon, and protective factor. We talk about protective factors and risk factors. Protective factors literally help protect us when in the face of something like gaslighting and other experiences that are adverse experiences. A risk factor makes them worse.
Yeah.
But just having somebody to bounce your reality off of. Doesn't have to be a therapist.
No, it doesn't. And I think for most people, often it's not. It's a close friend or a family member or somebody that they can just be like,
can I run this by you?
Yeah. Does this?
Am I crazy?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. If I feel constantly, confused or small around somebody, that's enough. That's enough for me to take note. Right. If I always have that reaction around somebody, I need to look at that. And go, okay, what's going on here? Why is this happening for me every time I'm around this person?
Right. Look at the pattern.
Absolutely. And the pattern isn't always their behavior that we notice first. The pattern can be our own gut, right? I told you before, notice when the hair on the back of your neck stands up. Notice when you get that sinking feeling in your gut when you're around a specific person. Our instinct, our intuition, we need to trust it enough to pay attention to it.
Right.
It's saying something's not right here. Anxiety is another one of those things. When we feel anxious, it's our brain's way of saying, hey, pay attention real quick. Just assess the situation. Maybe you don't need to continue feeling anxious, but just assess the situation because something here is telling your body that it's not right.
Right. Trusting our instincts. And gaslighting is one of the worst things about gaslighting, I think, again, in terms of adverse consequences, is we stop trusting our instincts.
That's right.
We forget we have them.
Or we're told that they're not trustworthy.
Right.
That's the really toxic and damaging part, is that gaslighting is making somebody else feel like their instincts are not, they're not accurate.
There's something wrong with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in terms of being more precise with our language, for our listeners to be more precise with their language, this is not to invalidate pain or
Absolutely
suffering. You know, it is really painful when somebody is just being defensive sometimes, or, you know, refuses to acknowledge that they've lied.
Yes.
But gaslighting, maybe we should reserve for, you know, that specific quality where it's somebody lying and lying in such a way that to break down your trust in yourself.
That's right. It was the same with boundaries, not kind of like applying it to everything.
Right.
It's the same with trauma. It devalues the word. And this is a real concern. This is why we are having these conversations about each one of these terms that we hear so frequently. Gaslighting is getting applied to every disagreement that somebody has. And you're right, we need to bring it back to that precision too. Gaslighting applies to an experience of being manipulated into not trusting yourself.
Right.
That doesn't mean, like, just because I say, I don't like what you said, or I disagree with that I'm gaslighting you.
This is, and it's a pattern. So it's a systematic erosion of, you know, a person's reality and sense of trust.
Yeah. And so when we bring the precision back to it, when we start using it appropriately, we're actually starting to protect survivor experience. We're protecting the people who are really experiencing that level of manipulation and abuse, and it keeps the term from becoming backgroundized. It's a great term, and it's so cool that it came from like this you know, from a movie, from a play, and a movie, and became part of pop culture. I think it's just a wonderful explanation for the phenomenon that's happening. Right. But we have to make sure that it is specific to the thing that's happening, right? And not just getting, you know, if it just becomes overused, it just becomes dismissed. Yeah. And then we have to go back to really trying to explain this really confusing experience for people. Right. And that's hard to do. Yeah. Right. As therapists, we do that all day. We're like, that's really what we do is in therapy is let's put a word to this really confusing and difficult experience that you're having. Yeah. In so many different ways, right? Depression isn't just one thing. It's this kind of like, you know, big picture of multiple experiences that we as therapists get to say, yeah, this sounds like this is something like depression. And for one person, it might feel and look like something different than the other person. Right. So it's the same with gaslighting. We want to be able to put the terms so that people will have a word to use, and that offers some relief then. Oh, I have this thing that I'm looking at. I know what the word is. Now I can actually plan on how to address it.
None of us are being overly sensitive if we just want our reality to be taken seriously. Right. If I want you to take me seriously when I'm telling you about something that happened, I'm not being unreasonable. No. And I think it's important that we tell ourselves that we're not being unreasonable. You know, in terms of if you find yourself in a situation where you're just trying to decide if you're being gaslit or not, the question isn't, does this meet some kind of official gaslighting threshold? Yeah. The question's more just, what is this pattern doing to me? And how is my day-to-day reality being affected? How is my self-image being affected? Yeah. And then kind of like going from there. What am I going to do with that information? Because I think that's where a breakdown sometimes happens too. We might recognize a pattern that's happening. We might say, oh, I'm in this manipulative kind of like dynamic and it's hurting me. But there's still that next step of like, now what am I going to do with that information? And I think that's where therapy really can help, or talking to anybody, right? If you have somebody who's trusted, you talk about it, it's no longer your secret. It's no longer just something that you're experiencing on the inside. You're calling attention to the thing. You're calling attention to what's hurting you or causing a reaction. And then when you share it with somebody, you get to say, okay, well, yeah, I guess I kind of have to do something about it now, or not, or you could sit with it, but like, you don't want to sit with that. That's kind of, But it is so important, again, to move beyond the threshold of, you know, that gaslighting relationship for a reality check.
Yes. So a simple guideline is like, if the core issue is a disagreement, then name what the disagreement is. If the core issue is defensiveness, if somebody's being defensive, then name the defensiveness. If it's a difference of memory, like you mentioned that exchange with your wife, or like, I remember this differently than she did.
Right.
You know, name that. Just say, oh my God, yeah, I think we have two different recollections of that event. And if it's a systematic erosion of your reality over time, that's when it's gaslighting. It's not disagreement, defensiveness, or like difference of memory recall.
Yeah, if I can look at you and say, oh my God, you've been trying for years to get me to doubt myself.
Right.
And not believe anything I experience or feel or say.
Yeah, that's the guideline, right? Those things. Name the elephant in the room. Name the thing that's happening. Don't just throw labels on it because they seem like they fit.